Welcome back, everyone, to Talking Point. I'm Mayor Mike Wiza, and on today's show, we have our Superintendent of Streets, Luke Kronstedt. Luke, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What I wanted to talk about in this episode is, and we did the same thing last year, we want to talk about the upcoming snowfalls, because we've got 6 months of bleak, dismal weather coming up with rain, and there's freezing rain, sleet, snow, and all those wonderful things that come with it. Give us an idea of how the Streets Department determines the plan of attack based on the anticipated snowfall or things like that.
Yep. We watch the weather a lot in the wintertime. That's what we do pretty much on a day-to-day basis. With today's event, we're anticipating chance of freezing rain, snow. So we are out brining right now, applying a salt solution to the roadway. Once it starts to snow out, we kind of rely on dispatch to, if our crews are not in the city at that time, our dispatch system will contact us and say, hey, the roads are getting slippery. It's time for you guys to get your crews out.
When you talk about dispatch, you mean the County Communications Center?
Correct.
Because we've got law enforcement and emergency services out on all of the roads all the time.
24 hours
we
a day.
use them as a gauge to determine the road conditions.
Correct.
So what might be happening on the south side of Point is not the same as happening on the north side of Point.
Right.
So the officers or whoever can call into the comm center and say, listen, Business 51 south of Flat Off's Gold Key Motors is starting to get slippery. You may want to send someone out.
Underpasses, that's one of the first things we normally hear about too. So.
Okay, and they wind up calling you. The comm center calls you.
Correct.
And then you determine who to call in.
Yeah, we've got a call-in system. We have 2-man crew that are on call every week, a week at a time. So they know on that week that they need to be around their phone, especially in the wintertime, waiting for that phone call from us. And then they'll come in, and depending upon the situation, those 2 guys might be able to handle it if it's just spot sanding or spot salting. Depending upon the situation, they will call in more crew as needed to do whatever we determine needs to be done.
Okay. Yeah, and I know Mother Nature is unpredictable. I get people that ask, why can't you plow at 5 a.m. so the streets are clear when I'm ready to go to work?
Right.
That works fine as long as Mother Nature agrees to stop the snow by 4:30.
Right. Yeah, we can't really control the weather.
No, and I imagine that the whole thing is very fluid. How do you determine what a snow event is? Are there snow thresholds, 1 inch, 2 inch, 5 inch?
We have a very straightforward policy here in Stevens Point. It's a 1 inch, 2 inch policy. Once we get 1 inch of snow, our crews come in and we will do sand or salt or plow the main arteries of the city, Michigan, Division, Church. Okay. Once we get to that 2 inch of snowfall, we'll call in enough crew and we start plowing the entire city.
Okay, and that brings up a pretty good point, because I know this, but I think our listeners may get some information. We have A, B, and C routes.
Correct.
Tell us what an A route is, what a B route is, what a C route is, and how you determine how those routes get plowed. I know the plan is available, and the plan's going to be up on our website again, so they can go to stevenspoint.com and just Google winter snow plan, I think it is. But tell us briefly how those A, B, and C routes, how they are defined and how we address them.
Sure. Our A and B routes are our main arteries. C routes are all the secondary roads. That has been determined. We do not have any city resident that is not within 3 or 4 blocks of an A or B route.
Okay.
So as long as they can get out their driveway and they can make it those couple blocks, they will get to a street that has been plowed, salted, or sanded.
Okay, when you say an A route, give me some examples. Division Street, I got to believe, is one.
Division, Michigan, North Point.
Main Clark?
Yep, Main Clark, downtown.
Okay, so the primary, what we would consider primary traffic roads.
Yep, the busiest
roads. And then B routes are
just kind of a secondary A route is essentially what they are.
Like a Franklin Street,
Yep.
4th Avenue.
Yep. And we kind of determine that with, again, keeping kind of a grid system throughout the city, so residents only have to go a couple blocks to reach one of those streets.
Okay, so let's say the snow is going to continue all day long. You plow and salt the A and B routes.
Yep.
Then you start working on the C routes right away, or do you go back because there's so many miles of A route that in a continuously snowing event, you may have to go back multiple times a day on those A and B routes?
Right. It all depends on the snow amount, how much is coming down. If it's snowing out steady, we're probably going to stay on the A and B routes as long as we can. Okay. If it starts to let up and we think we can start getting some of those secondary roads done, we definitely break off because we realize the residents need to be able to get in and out of their driveways. So
Okay. So on a typical snow event, let's say we're going to get 3 to 6 inches over the course of the evening. How many plow trucks do we have roughly?
in order to plow all the C routes, we have 11 trucks.
Total trucks.
We do have a spare truck just in case something happens, and quite frankly, that happens quite often.
I imagine big heavy equipment doing big heavy things.
Right.
They break down every once in a while.
Yeah, and a lot of manholes in town. We can.
Well, I suppose I hadn't
break
thought of that. When
blades.
the blade is down that low and you hit a manhole or something or a curb,
It's dangerous.
that's got to be pretty rough. I've ridden along with some of the plow truck drivers, so I know the talent that
Right.
goes into being
It's
able
not
to
easy.
manage those big plow trucks
Yep.
and the wing and the bottom blades, things like that.
And to remember when you have to turn your salter off and turn it on, and it's a process.
I can
it's
imagine.
difficult.
It brings up the kind of a little off topic, but they have a plow driver rodeo out in the Fox Valley somewhere.
Yeah, Green Bay at Lambeau Field. We send normally between 5 and 10 drivers there each year to compete.
And I remember, was it last year or the year before, where Kevin Barkowiak, one of our plow truck drivers, brought home some hardware?
Yeah, he took 3rd place and he took 5th place in the last handful of years. So
Nice. So that really shows that this rodeo thing, they have cones and everything, and you have to.
it's difficult. I got to do it a couple years ago, and it was interesting.
I should try it somewhere. Just the one year,
on
just
over.
plow all over the cones and everything.
Come on over.
So, some of the common complaints that my office receives, and I know you get the same sorts of complaints. Nobody likes dealing with the snow.
Correct.
It's pretty the first couple of times, and after that, it's really just annoying.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Yeah.
The fact that we have limited amount of space to put snow in some areas of the city. Talk about how important it is to keep the streets wide enough for parking and vehicle traffic, and what you do in situations where maybe the boulevard is narrow or even non-existent.
Try and slow down in those areas. We don't want to fill up sidewalks with snow because residents don't like that. That's why we kind of prefer, and when people call, we mention to them, when you're cleaning up your sidewalks, please take that snow and put it into your front yard instead of onto the boulevard, because we use the boulevard as snow storage.
Yeah, and I know it gets really rough because the wet, sloppy snow, because we're using salt to help melt that, gets wet and sloppy. It gets plowed up on the sidewalks sometimes, and it's very difficult to
and
get
it
that
freezes.
removed. Yeah, once it hardens. So what are the average speeds? The other complaint I get is, that plow truck flew by at 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I know that doesn't happen because we have GPSs on all of our trucks. Let me say that again. We have GPSs on all of our trucks, so we know where they are, when they are, and how fast they were going.
Right. We typically keep our trucks between 15 and 17 miles an hour. They're large pieces of equipment, diesel, so they sound bigger and louder and faster than they're actually going.
Mm-hmm.
So again, with the GPS, we know exactly what's going on, so we can go back and check, and 90% of the time we're right where we need to be for speed.
Well, and the thing that I think people tend to forget is the fact that so when we get a snow event, our drivers come in and they clear the streets for all of us. And when their streets are cleared, they have to go home and do their own snow removal too at their own house.
Correct.
And a lot of times that means shoveling out the driveway because the plow truck went through. It may have even been them that plowed in their own driveway. It happens. But
And that's after them plowing for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time. So, I mean, they're get home tired, and they need to clean out, or we need to clean out our driveways at the end of the day as well.
So our ordinances require that the sidewalks be clear of snow and ice within a certain time frame. And if that means if you have a boulevard, someplace to put the snow, and again, we don't want you to put it in the boulevard, but we want you to put it in your side of the yard to make room for the snow, you have 24 hours to clear it.
Correct.
Now that's a little subjective too, because if the snow stops at 2 o'clock and starts again at 3 o'clock, that clock starts over.
And that gets to be difficult. If it's a longer event, we are always plowing during the entire event. We could plow in front of your house 3 times.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Sometimes I think you do.
we do. We come by, we plow, you come out, you clean the end of your driveway, and 2 hours later, we might be back through to plow again. And we don't obviously do it on purpose, but depending upon the storm, our number one job is to keep the streets clear, and that's what we have to do.
Right. And I get comments too that the plow truck went by 5 times. It may have gone through a couple of times, but it also depends on where you live, because with the garage being at Buchholz Park, the plow trucks leave and return to that location
Right.
potentially several times a day.
Correct.
So you may see the plow truck going by, and I got to tell you, if the drivers see that the road needs a little bit of touch up or clearing, they're going to put the plow blade
If you're
down.
driving past it, you might as well plow it.
Exactly. So it's efficiency. It's not redundancy necessarily.
And we have to go back to fill up with diesel, fill up with sand, fill up with salt. I mean, they still need to take breaks. We still need to make sure our drivers are fresh and ready to go.
Yesterday too, it reminds me, yesterday, the 25th of November, was declared National Plow Truck Driver Day.
Yep.
So we want to thank everybody for all the services they provide all winter long.
Yep.
And I apologize in advance for all the yelling and complaining and shovel throwing that they're probably going to experience.
Well, they were happy yesterday. We had a bunch of pizza at the shop.
Did you?
So it was a good day.
Nice.
Yeah.
So talk about the physics, I guess, of a snow and ice event. The salt that we use. How much salt did we buy this year?
This year, we ended up buying about 4,500 tons.
4,500 tons of salt.
Yeah.
And then from what I know, we also have some in reserve where if we start running out, if we have a winter like we did last year that really went from July to June.
Yeah. It's a small percentage. The reserve is not much. But this year we kind of used it as a restocking year, I guess I'd say, to make sure our shed is full. And we won't use all that salt. We've been relying more and more on sand.
Famous last words.
We'll be fine.
Tell us about where do we purchase salt from?
It actually comes over from Green Bay. It's trucked from Green Bay.
And it's a state contract, right?
It is. And one interesting tidbit on salt is the price is determined upon the water level in the Great Lakes.
Really?
The lower the water level, the smaller the ships they can't have as much salt in. So.
Oh, I had never known that. That's
interesting. Nobody has. I never thought of it either.
Well, people wonder about why gas prices vary so much from town to town.
A lot more that factors into it than what a person thinks.
Yeah, that's good to know. So we have actually reduced our salt use over the years by creating our own brine mixing facility and using a brine. Yep. First of all, tell me what brine is and tell me the logic behind it. What does brine do?
Brine is essentially a saltwater solution. It's a 23.3% salt. We mix it up at our shop. We have approximately 6,000 gallons on hand at all times. We use it as, essentially it sticks to the salt as we're spreading the salt. It makes the salt moist. It sticks to the road better. Okay. Before we used it, the salt would hit the road and kind of scatter, like if rocks falling out of the back of your truck, which you end up losing up to 40% of the salt that you're applying to the road. Wow. So with the brine, it hits the ground and it sticks better.
Okay, so when it sticks, I know you'll probably see that today because we're expecting a snow, but you'll see white lines going down the middle of the road. That's the brine, right?
Yep, that's just salt water that's dried to the road. Okay. So when it starts to snow or freezing rain, whatever mixture we're going to get this evening, it acts as a barrier between the pavement and the snow. Okay. The snow will hit it. It will immediately melt, which will cause a moisture layer in between there. So when we come through and plow, it will scrape up cleaner.
So it not only helps us lift the snow and ice from the road after an event, because people drive on it, it packs down, that sort of thing, but it also melts. So when we have an event, a larger event, it'll melt from the bottom up and the top down when we resalt. Yep. So you're actually making it much more efficient to keep the roads clear.
Right, and brine is extremely cheap. We make it in-house again. It's costs us approximately 7 cents per gallon. Wow. So today we will probably use about 1,500 gallons of brine on our brine route, which is a lot of our, again, main arterial roads. So from dollars and cents wise, it's a lot cheaper to use brine than it is to wait until it snows and then salt on top of it.
I can imagine. Yeah. And it also saves us money. We spend less, but we also use less salt. Right. Roughly, what are our savings in salt consumption?
I would guess somewhere in the 15 to 20% range.
Okay. And that's important. I know I got people that own body shops and things like that, and they're like, don't use salt on the road because it eats away the metal. But the alternative is you have slippery roads. Right. You have roads that smaller cars can't get through.
We try and be as proactive as we possibly can, and with salt prices continuing to rise, we're at about $80, $85 per ton right now.
Wow.
We need to conserve as much salt as we possibly can because, quite frankly, we need the money in our budget for other things.
Sure. How about sand? What is it? Just sand, or is there a sand salt mixture? What do you use?
We mix in some salt into our sand. It's about 5%.
Okay.
And we've been utilizing sand a lot more in recent years.
Okay. So, have you noticed any differences in the traction that's created on sand versus salt? Because you usually sand most of the intersections, right? Not
correct.
the roads.
Yep, intersections and any of the underpasses or overpasses that we have in town. Normally, you'll see more spot sanding.
And then we come through in spring and sweep up all the sand. And
correct.
We don't get to reuse that sand, do we?
No, I've been trying to figure out a way how to do that in recent years, but with different DNR restrictions, it makes it a little bit tricky.
Sure. We haven't talked about this yet. It was actually your idea. The plow trucks, instead of just the big ugly blade, you started a Paint the Plow program a couple of years ago. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think about 3 years ago, I saw in a trade magazine, there was another municipality somewhere in Wisconsin that started having their plows painted by local grade schools, and I thought that would be something that Stevens Point would definitely think is cool. We're a unique community that I think it's worked out wonderfully. I mean, the schools, we drop off 7 plows at the local grade schools, and they have about a month and a half to paint them. And with our great sponsor, Frank's Hardware, offering up some gift certificates so they could use for paint, brushes, rollers, whatever they want. It's been a really, really good, fun program, and we take all 7 plow trucks through the holiday parade every year. We just had that last Friday, and our plow truck drivers absolutely love it. They get to take along, their grandkid or a friend's son, maybe that has some health problems or something, and they think it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, and it is. I've gotten lots of positive feedback, so I hope you're able to continue that with the partnership we have through Frank's Hardware.
Yeah, we're planning on it.
To get those materials done, and as it goes through the grades, adults will be able to, our kids will be becoming adults, and they'll still see that plow program going.
It's a great way to get the community involved, and normally people don't think snow plowing is that great. They don't like it. They don't want to see the piles that we leave behind. Yeah. But the way I looked at it is, maybe they'll see the plow on the front, and maybe it'll say McKinley or Jefferson or Madison or any of the other schools that we have in the program, and maybe they'll take it a little bit easier on us at the end of the day.
There you go. It's all about taking it easy. No, the plow painting is going really well, and it does. So when you see the plow truck come through, it's not just this big ugly plow blade. It's literally a piece of art that you probably know the kid or the parents of the kid or something along those lines that created that.
Right.
So you do feel a little bit better.
Yeah, and we try and put that plow in that neighborhood of the school. Mm-hmm. So
the route that one does.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, there's plenty of times that our drivers will come back and say, the kids happen to be out at recess, so they'd go by and honk the horn at them. And it's better than kids throwing snowballs at us. So.
Well, so we've got, from what I understand, Justin Lowe told me this morning that this is the second year. We've had 2 years of record snowfall. The odds of having a third year of record snowfall are small. The last time that happened was 3 years in a row in the early 70s. But just in case we have another significant snowfall, let's talk about how this winter is going to progress and some of the challenges that our drivers face and our citizens face with the accumulation of snow.
Right.
When you're plowing, keeping the roads clear, those banks get higher and higher. Yeah. The roads get narrower and narrower. Talk about when we decide or when we have the ability to pick snow.
Yeah, we have 3 picking routes currently. Kind of determine when we're going to start picking when the visibility of the snowbank starts to make it difficult for people to see at intersections. Mm-hmm. The vision triangle is a very important thing. We can't have people inching out into streets and to the point where they're going to cause an accident. So we'll come in and with our graders and our dump trucks at nighttime, clear the snow away, haul it out, and we stockpile it at various locations throughout the city.
So major areas that I see that need to be clear are around City Hall, Main Street. Talk about Main Street and the downtown area. That's got to be challenging in and of
very
itself
difficult.
because you've got all those bump outs. Your truck is actually having to serpentine the whole area. So
Yeah.
the business owners will come and they'll shovel their sidewalk to the street. The plows come through and push the sidewalk or the street snow back onto the sidewalk. And we got to try and find that sweet spot. But I think it's also important that we, pick that route sooner. Tell us the prioritization there.
Yeah, and we do. That is on Route 1. So the courthouse, downtown, the square, the whole Main Street area is definitely Route 1. It's a very busy area, a lot of foot traffic, and we need to, quite frankly, keep the snowbanks out of the way so residents can get to the stores and do what they want to do. So we're there after any major snow event, and that's the first places that we clear out.
Yeah, and it seems logical to do that because if you have the snowbank in the boulevard or between the sidewalk and the street in that little area, people who park on the street have a challenging time getting over the snowbank to get to either the courthouse or the jail or the annex or any of the downtown businesses. So we try and keep that a priority. I say we, but I mean you.
Yep.
Keeping that a priority to keep it clear. Are there any other challenges that kind of present themselves as we get larger and larger piles of snow accumulation as the year goes on?
Not really. We've got a pretty good system down pat. When the snowbanks get high enough, we'll pick them. When we get certain cul-de-sacs, people will call and say the piles are getting so big. We have a list at work, and we, when time permits, we'll get there and we start on the list.
Yeah.
If you called in, we'll get to it. And if it snows again, we might end up having to go back and pick the downtown again. Yeah. If it stops snowing, then we just keep going. We keep picking as much as we can.
And I guess that's the thing that I wanted to stress is that keeping the roads clear and safe is the number one priority. Moving the snow becomes number two.
Correct. Parking lots, we use loaders to clear up all the public parking lots, and they get to be pretty large piles at times. Yeah. And if it keeps snowing and all of our manpower, we only have so many guys. Yeah. We can't have every crew doing everything all the time. So we have to prioritize, and the streets are number one. When the streets aren't calling our name, we'll then go to parking lots and we'll go to picking.
And that's important for people to remember, too, because we have a limited number of resources.
Correct.
Just because they're not in your area of town at that particular time doesn't mean that someone's sitting around doing nothing. We're busy.
We're very proactive at the streets department with making sure as soon as we know there is any sort of unsafe condition on the roadway, we have personnel sent out.
Well, we've got 150 miles or so of road in the city, so it's important that people remember that too. But in addition to the roads, there are things that the Public Works Department clears from snow that aren't streets.
Yeah, we have a lot of sidewalks that we also clear.
Yeah, the city-owned property, between you and the Parks Department, you have to handle all of the sidewalks as well on that city-owned property, whether it's adjacent to a park or adjacent to some other form of public property. Yep. Your area is responsible for clearing that snow too. And I bet they don't like it anymore when the plow trucks come by and push snow on the sidewalk.
No, especially on the bridge. We typically have an issue there with the trucks are plowing it onto the sidewalk, and our sidewalk guy, who takes a lot of pride in his work, wants it not on his sidewalk. So it's a fine line, and we're still working on that one.
Let's talk about some of the resources available to the public. Over the years, the sand barrels that we used to have on a lot of corners had gone away because of budget cuts.
Yep.
We've been doing very well, and we've been reestablishing some of those sand boxes.
Correct. We've got 4 of them at various locations right now.
And that's just for private
residential use.
Residential use. Yeah, residential use. Contractors are not allowed to go there and take snow or the salt and sand out of the box. Yep. But we also have, if the box happens to be empty, I would urge you to call the streets department and let them know that it's empty, but we usually do a pretty good job of checking.
Yeah, normally about once a week, I'll send someone out and check all the boxes. And then if they happen to be empty, we do have a secondary location at the drop-off at Bucole Park location that we always have.
And that's also 24/7. It's outside the drop-off. Exactly. So you can go there and take a 5-gallon bucket of sand, salt mixture home to use on your own private property. That I think has been a real big boon to the residents, because not everybody has access to
Right.
these things, and some people prefer sand over salt,
Right.
because the salt in the spring, when it runs off, it'll kill your grass, and you got to reestablish all that.
Right.
So, if there's one thing that you would want residents to know when it comes to our attacking a winter snow event, what would it be?
We've been doing it a long time, and at times it might not appear that we are approaching it in a way that they think is correct, but we are watching the weather all day, almost every day, and we kind of know what we need to do and when we need to do it. We don't have the budget that we can have 12 or 13 guys out in trucks 24/7 to do that. So at times we have to wait a little bit. We have to wait until there's that half inch, 3/4 of an inch of snow before we start to call too many guys in, because we can't have them plowing 24 hours a day, and we don't have the staff to do multiple shifts. So
Yeah, and that's important to note too, because people probably don't understand the regulations that we have to follow in regards to plow drivers.
right, they can't drive 24 hours a day.
We have, I think it's 12 hours?
I believe so.
They have a 12-hour limit, but we certainly don't want to push them that far. So you may see crews stop plowing in the middle of a snow event. If that is predicted to be a very long snow event, we may send people home, get some sleep, and then come back, and you might be plowing for the next 10 hours.
Right.
When you get
We
back.
have the capability of scheduling 2 shifts, so we can do 12 hours on, 12 hours off. But in the wintertime, there's no guarantee. People do get sick. It would take the flu to come through our shop one time, and we could really be hurting.
Yeah.
So we have to watch it. We have to be careful.
One other thing just occurred to me, because there are all sorts of challenges. Like I said, nobody really likes the winter snow removal process, and I tend to push all of the snow in my driveway to my backyard, because I don't know how much snow we're going to get. Only a couple of years have I had to move snow from the front around to the back, and that is more challenging than doing it right the first time. But I see people frequently use their snowblower or shovel to blow that snow into the street.
Yeah, and that does become an issue. They get mad because we're putting the snow in their driveway. Trust me, we don't want to put it there. If we had a method to leave the driveways open, we would definitely do that. So as the winter goes on, we see more and more of that. We just urge people to put as much snow in your front yard as you possibly can. Leave the boulevards as bare as you possibly can, because that is our only area that we can store snow in.
Right. That reminds me of one other thing. Not only is it dangerous to blow that snow into the street, but it's also illegal.
It is.
You could get a fine for it. I don't know that we've actually done a lot of that. But there was this video of a plow truck. It's a grader, actually, in Alaska, where they came through and they drop an arm down, so they go past your driveway and then pick the arm up. And people have asked, why can't we do that here? Well, the main reason we can't do it here is because at 150 miles of road, it would take us 3 days to plow, because you have to go by so slow and move that mechanical arm every 20 feet, because in the city, your driveways are pretty close together.
Yeah.
It's just not practical. That video was from rural Alaska.
Right.
And it's
an
just
awesome
not the same
concept,
thing.
but it's not feasible in our city. So it's kind of...
Well, Luke, I want to thank you for joining us today. Hopefully our listeners and viewers have a little more insight in the upcoming winter season and what it really takes to keep our roads safe and clear, and the sidewalks that need to be clear. Please pass along our gratitude to those plow drivers, and we wish for them to have a safe and uneventful winter season. Just remember to be patient with our plow drivers and the ability to clear snow. Perfect. So thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This has been Talking Point. I'm Mayor Mike Wiza, and we'll see you next time.